everything so that it'll simply be ready for other people to look at. As I said, you guys being here, you don't unless you have this burning need, don't bother. You don't have to bother to read it. Now, our book. I'm going to do the share screen thing in a second. I want to bring up the course ebook. All right. All right. So I'm going to bring that up. The ebook, and now I'll go back to sharing screens. Okay, so the ebook is Introduction to Public Health. Now, knowing how much all of you love ebooks, we are ordering through Amazon, since we don't buy textbooks now, we're ordering copies of the book. When they come in, which I hope we'll have by class on Wednesday, we'll give you guys copies. But you can, it downloads well. I've got it, I've been playing with it for the last few days. So what I suggest you do is get started with the readings. The readings this week are chapters 1 through 3, and then 8 and 10. So I suggest you go ahead and get started reading with the ebook. If you want to print it because you prefer, hard copy to reading on a screen, quite frankly, I can't blame you. Go ahead and send it here, and let's print it out, and you can have a printed copy. The book itself, the very beginning of it, is includes the usual glop, a content, table of contents, and then a preface and a prologue. The prologue is something you should read. The first section of this book, the prologue, is actually a lot of information in it. And so I think it's a good idea to read it. I read it last week, and I've read the first couple of chapters. There's a lot of information. Public health is something that a lot of people don't much care about because they don't know anything about it. So what we have is an issue with understanding what the topic is. Public health, normally health, and Brandy's have been dealing with the last 2 days. I mean, normally is when we think of healthcare, we think about going to the doctor and ending up with, being treated, seeing a doctor face-to-face, one-on-one, or maybe, if we're going with a child or an elderly parent or something, 2-on-1, 1-on-2. But nonetheless, it's a face-to-face issue. And the concern is the health of that individual patient. Very little attention is paid by the standard medical professions to the health of the community. But the health of the community is the subject of public health, obviously. It has to do with things like education, wash your hands, cover your mouth when you sneeze. These are all educational issues, and they fall under public health because public health is about preventing the spread of disease. whereas the usual medicine is about curing the disease, fixing injuries, etc. But public health issues are different in that they look at the broader community instead of individuals. This doesn't mean that the people involved in public health don't care about individuals, obviously. They do. But the public health service is a branch of the military. The commissioned officers of the public health service they have the same ranks as no, that's the Coast Guard. I think they use the same ranks as the Army and the Air Force. My sister-in-law was a medical records administrator, and she was in the public health service for her entire career. She worked for what used to be called HCFA, the Healthcare Financing Agency, then became the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and she was the project leader for the construction of ICD-10. She retired as a colonel. Okay, and so we actually acquired her uniform because my daughter, who's the theater person, we gave it to her for costuming. Mm-hmm. But we actually acquired my sister-in-law's uniform, and it looks more like a naval uniform than anything else. Not like Army or Air Force, but more like naval. But nonetheless, it is a military service, and it reports to the Office of the Surgeon General. And as such, it has responsibilities, broad responsibilities for public health. It includes, hey, Cody.
Is good to go?
I think so. Everybody's here. So, well, everybody who's going to be here for a while is. Oh. But I'm expecting Layla Brooks, and that's probably the last of my 6 that will come in tonight.
All right. You guys have a good night.
Thanks. We'll see you on Wednesday.
All right. See you Wednesday.
But the Public Health Service includes the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, which is a major research lab. It does not include the Army Institutes of Research, the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research, the United States Army Infectious Disease Lab, AMRID. But it does include a large component. It's largely invisible because we don't see those guys, but they have an extremely important set of duties. And the goal of public health is to prevent disease, and it's done by a lot of different things. If we look back at the history of medicine, mostly what you see is drugs and treatments and technology, MRIs and CTs and all this other stuff. What you don't see is the efforts made by the Public Health Service, which actually has been in existence since 1791 in one form or another. It really was ramped up after the Civil War, the U.S. Civil War, and started engaging in a number of different activities in the latter half of the 19th century that led to a number of things: cleaning up water supplies, cleaning up the food supply. There were a number of disastrous food issues at the late in the 19th and early in the 20th century. The horror stories that are told about meatpacking plants actually were covered in a Sinclair Lewis novel about things. Hello, Layla, come on in. Glad you could make it. You came in Just about when I thought you'd make it. I said you'd be here between 6:15 and 6:30. So what I'm asking is, I sent everyone a Zoom link. I'm asking everybody to get on Zoom. We actually have 6 people in the class. And and 3 of them are not going to be here tonight. And a couple of them may not be here ever because they are actually online students. Okay, Richard, did you ever get into this?
No.
Go ahead and get in.
Do I need to go through the?
Yeah, just go through the
service?
email. Just click on that link in the email. Because I'm going to bring some things up and show them on the on the Zoom. So right now we're talking about the textbook. I mentioned that the textbook is an ebook. We are ordering copies, and hopefully later this week we'll have copies of this book for everybody. For those of you who are online, if there's any way you can get in and see Kim or Christy or Amanda, you can get copies as well, or maybe even Nate if he's here. You can get copies as well. But it would be useful if we could all get these. Otherwise, it is available as an ebook on the program. And as I said earlier, Layla, the reading assignments this week are chapters 1 through 3, 8, and 9. And I also suggest you read the prologue, which is lengthy but very packed with information. So I would suggest you get started on that reading before you get the textbook. Okay? So.
I'm sorry, did you say not to join the audio?
Yeah, mute the audio. Mute your audio. Otherwise, we get feedback in here. Oh, lucky you. All right, well, when you can, log in. Couple of things. I really don't want those. So we will, what we'll be discussing, and I've been talking about the sort of the history of public health. And I just mentioned that the Public Health Service is a quasi-military organization and has responsibilities for maintaining public health. Been in existence officially since 1791. So it was an agency established in the earliest days of this country's history, but it really ramped up shortly after the Civil War. But toward the end of the 19th century, a lot of things were going on. The Army, specifically Dr. Walter Reed, working during the Spanish-American War in Cuba and in Panama later, developed a vaccine against typhoid fever, and was working on a vaccine against malaria. We have yet now, about a century and a quarter later, we don't have one. And there are reasons to believe that it's not likely. Now, having said that, not likely doesn't mean impossible. Just like we pretty much believe that it's not likely we'll have an AIDS vaccine. But again, because every single lead has not panned out, including 3 or 4 that I was involved in. So, we'll see. But then we started the process of looking at how to prevent disease. In the early part of the 20th century, the food processing, and especially the meat packing industry, was shown to be a horror story. I mean, just a pure horror story, with contaminated food supplies. So laws began to get passed, and the usual political wrangling, who's in charge. The Public Health Service is in charge of some of it. The Agricultural Service is in charge of some of it. The Food and Drug Administration is in charge of some of it. We got a lot of cooks, but you know, the thing is, they actually work together pretty well because they do have a common goal, which is protection of the public. And these are really legitimately public servants that are doing this work. So we have a lot that's going on. So they were cleaning that up, and then public health started taking more. We started getting into sanitation of the water supplies and indoor plumbing and safer and more adequate housing. All of these things were considered public health. There's a lot of data that tells us that a more prosperous public is a healthier public. So there's a lot of people in the public health industry that really push for things like raising minimum wages so that people can have a higher standard of living, because we know that means they have a healthier life. That's public health. So it seems like it's also, so you can see that it's also political, because public health issues, cleaning up the water supply, revamping all of our plumbing or all of our water treatment facilities, is also an intensely political issue. Why? It's expensive. About 15 years ago, the city of Raleigh, North Carolina was boomtown USA. I mean, North Carolina was just expanding, and Raleigh was just, it was like a watermelon dropped from the 100th floor, just splattering in all directions, and very fast. And this was probably 5 or 6 years after we moved out of that part of North Carolina and came back to Colorado. But they started growing. And what they had was, they found that their sewage treatment plant was totally inadequate. And they looked at how they could make it work. And they came to a realization. The realization was that their sewage treatment plant actually was quite capable of handling the population for the foreseeable growth future, except for one factor: garbage disposals. People pushing their crud down the garbage disposal were clogging up the sewage facilities and making them very, very unworkable. So they looked at how to do this. They priced out a new water treatment facility, and it was well over $1 billion, I understand. And then somebody came up with a really interesting idea: ban garbage disposals. And they did. So now if you build a new house, you cannot put a garbage disposal in it. If your garbage disposal in your house fails, you cannot replace it. And their sewage facility is capable of handling the mess now. And education. People with poor grease. I mean, yeah. My wife and I both grew up, at various times in our lives, we grew up with septic systems. When you have a septic system, you learn grease and oil and other crap like that is not what goes down your garbage disposal. Well, they shouldn't, but especially a septic system can't handle it. And in fact, people who have septic systems almost always do not use garbage disposals either, for the same reason. They fill up, and then it's expensive to either replace them or get them to get pumped out. You know, you have to call the honey wagon out, and they pump it out. That works, but nonetheless, if you don't put it there, it's a lot longer between the visits by the sanitation guys, right? And so less money. So they did that, and it worked. To this day, my wife and I rarely use a garbage disposal. Almost never. And I stopped using them. We never did, and but we'd have friends who'd come over to the house. One time, I remember a friend of ours, we were in North Carolina. It was strawberry picking season. Strawberry season lasts about 2 weeks in North Carolina, and the strawberries are unbelievable. And so we'd go out and pick gallons of them and freeze them, and have good strawberries all year. Well, our friend Rhoda comes over, and she decides that she went out and picked strawberries with my wife and daughters. She decided she'd clean hers up. I wasn't paying attention, and she stuffed all of the stuff, the leaves and everything, off her cleaned up strawberries into our garbage disposal and clogged it up. And I was, first off, if there's any household chore I hate, it's plumbing. I absolutely hate it. And I especially hate it when somebody does something like that. Clogs up the garbage disposal. And so I had to tear everything apart. And I actually replaced half the plumbing under the sink because of the way they designed those things. And I said, nope, I don't care what the code is. I'm doing the work. And I fixed it. We never had a problem again, but we also never put stuff down. You know, rice. You want your trap that's just past the drain snake that you own. This happened to me. Rice goes down there, dries out, packs, solidifies, and it's cement. I had a 100-foot drain snake. It was at 110 feet. I had to call in a plumber to get it. You know, that's just part. That was literally a public health decision, because we have to have, the law requires that we have sewage treatment. So Raleigh was faced with a problem. And whoever came up with that brilliant idea probably deserved a big reward, because it was brilliant, because it worked. And it was cheap. Now, were there people who were mad at him? You bet. All the guys that make garbage disposals, you bet they were mad. And the response was, you know, forget it. Tough luck. We're not going to have you ruining our system. So public health involves that. Public health is washing hands. In the 20th century, we saw an increase in average lifespan in this country from 45 to 75 years of age. 25 of those years are due to public health. Now we think of, a lot of it, we think of things like, who is printing everything under the sun?
I have no idea, but that's been going off since I got in here.
Well, it's been going on since I came in at about 5:30. So,
He's printing a PowerPoint. And my guess is it's probably one of Nate's students, because it looks like one of those PowerPoints.
they should have printed it back to education, where we don't have anybody back there right now printing. And it's a quieter printer because it sits right behind my desk. I know that printer. At any rate, so a lot of times we think that one of the major factors that that has increased our lifespan, or has led to an increased average lifespan. I mean, people have always lived to be over 100. Even if you don't believe the numbers in the Bible, people have always lived to be over 100. Maybe not 700 or 800 years, but a long time. But if you look at the 19th century, when the chances of children surviving past the age of 5 were about 20%. That's going to skew the numbers down a long way. So we think of the major reasons that we've increased our lifespan as medical technology. Antibiotics. Well, antibiotics, penicillin wasn't discovered until 1928. And it was a curiosity until World War II, and the government threw tons of money at the pharmaceutical industry to have them develop means of manufacturing large quantities. Well, that led to the revolution in antibiotic therapy. We attribute a lot of that, but all of that happened after the majority of that lifespan had already changed. And it changed because of cleaning up the water supplies, educating people about basic hygiene, and vaccination. Those were the major factors. But on top of that, better housing. There are people who classify the unions as a public health initiative or a public health benefit because people weren't working 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, or 6 days a week if they had a good employer. And they weren't starting to work. The child labor laws changed. Safety in the workplace changed. All of this stuff predates the antibiotic revolution. So 25 of those 30 years are from public health. And we spend about 3% of our healthcare dollars on public health. Now, think about that. What would happen if we spent 10% of our healthcare dollars on public health?
We might actually have that AIDS vaccine.
We might. We might. And possibly a malaria vaccine. But the problem is public health efforts are expensive. And politicians don't like to spend money. Or at least they don't like to look like they're spending money, even though they spend it out the wazooby. But they will fight things and say, oh, we can't afford that. And then do other things that cost infinitely more.
Like build the wall.
Oh, Mexico's paying for that.
How do we manage that one?
But did you see the senator that got arrested for insider trading?
Yeah.
And it was an HIV vaccine that they were trying to make. And since he sat on the board, he got info that it failed trials. He's trying to call everybody just on the regular phone.
Yep.
They must have him tapped already.
They must have. They caught
Had
it.
all those
Yeah.
conversations.
Yeah, he just let people know so that they could sell off before the news hit. Yeah. You know, just because you're in Congress doesn't mean you're not a crook. Hey, Candy.
Well, they also call a group of veterans to Congress, so there you go.
Actually, they're probably more effective, but that's all right. No, we won't discuss politics. But public health is a tremendous issue for us to understand. Public health is now taking on other aspects, and I think what I'd like to do is discuss the layout of the class, go through the shell, which I will share with you on the screen here so that we can all just take a look at it. Go through the shell and talk about what we're going to be doing this mod. And also, I want all of you to think long and hard as we go through the mod about what's working and what's not. What I told Brandy and Richard, Layla, before you got here, is that as far as anyone on this campus can tell, this class has never been taught before. Okay? So it's brand new. Certainly hasn't been taught on this campus. Has it been taught online? We don't have many examples of it online, so I doubt seriously it's been taught very much. And we are changing the course requirements for the degree programs. So this one has come on, and I'm probably going to help write a class that I wish we'd had 10 years ago, which is medical calculations. Finally, we're going to have a class in medical calculations.
Yay, we don't have to, they won't have to spend the whole.
Half a mod
Yeah.
talking about calculating doses, yes.
Oh, God, that's horrible.
Yeah, and it's, so we are changing some things, but this class so this class is actually new. It is, and it really is a class that I think is very important, and understanding the public health system, because all of you are going to be in the health system somewhere, and you'll be interacting with public health. Doctors have a requirement to report infectious disease to the CDC. That's public health. To track these things. If you remember, how many of you were in the class where I showed the medicated child? Were any of you in that class?
No, you
The
had it
frontline
in the,
video
You had it in the course. for
in the
us.
shell, because
When you
you
did
were
it
at a
the
night
next mod.
class.
Yeah,
Yeah, all right.
when you did it the next mod, we had it in the shell.
Yeah.
That was painful to watch.
Well, and that was a public health effort as well, to some extent. But the other one, the vaccine war, remember that one? That was about public health. And so there we saw an example of how the public health, how the people who are the beneficiaries of public health issues don't understand public health and don't understand why they're benefiting and how they're benefiting. So we have a disconnect between knowledge and benefit. It always, public health benefits the other guy. We see health as going to the doctor. Public health service sees health as stopping you from needing to go to the doctor. Really literally. Yeah, you still should go in periodically, because there are things that public health can't do a bloody thing about. We can't do anything about sun-induced cancers. Can't shut the sun off. We can advise people to wear sunscreen, hats. After my daughter's wedding, we took off and went to Santa Fe and Mesa Verde. I was so happy to have a wide-brimmed hat, because it was hot and sunny. So there's not a whole lot we can do about some things.
You think it'd be out of paper by now?
No, I think that probably has a couple thousand page capacity. But the thing is that people see public health as not being of benefit to them. I never get sick. They don't understand that one of the reasons they never get sick is because of public health efforts that have been going on for the past century and a half in this country. Public health is not just a U.S. issue. It is a worldwide issue. If we look at what's going on in Central Africa with outbreaks of Ebola, and Brazil with outbreaks of Zika virus, and we look at these things, and we don't understand, we don't realize that we can get anywhere on this planet. We can get to the United States from anywhere on this planet in less than the incubation period of these organisms. So we can be exposed, we can bring it home, and we can be exposing other people before we even know we're sick. So this is not just a problem of vaccination and education. It's a problem of changing the way people think. Have any of you ever played the board game Pandemic?
I played the phone app.
The phone app. Haven't played that.
I think they took it to like a whole other level, but I also never played the board game. So
Well, the board game is a cooperative game. One of the reasons I like it is a cooperative game. You have to work together with all the other people around the board to prevent the world from being destroyed by disease. Okay? And it's also an educational game. If you ever get a chance to borrow it or play it, I suggest you do, because there's a lot of stuff in there that is really related to disease and outbreak. I don't know if any of you ever saw the movie, it's about 20 years old, Outbreak, with Dustin Hoffman and Morgan Freeman and Rene Russo. It was about an outbreak of a virus from Africa. It was totally fictional and not likely. The characters were too cardboard to me. But nonetheless, it was if you set aside the Hollywood science, it was really a good explanation of how we deal with a major outbreak of a disease for which we have no cure or no way to handle. And we're there with a number of diseases, even diseases endemic to the United States, like hantavirus. No cure. And if you go down to the Four Corners area, it's there. So we do have things that, and there's concern. People are watchful about it.
There's a couple cases played here.
Plague we got, yeah. And it's in, all these people that think prairie dogs are cute.
they're cute so long as they stay over there.
Yeah. I was walking up I think it was, anyway, one of the trails off Taft Hill Road. And obviously the prairie dogs there are almost tame. Because we were walking up the trail and prairie dogs are 10 feet away and they're just lying there looking at us. You're not going to bother us. Not at all. I'm sitting there thinking, huh. And there were people who would, oh, how cute, and walk up to them. Again, education. Education.
Well, then we fill kids' heads with the idea that the plague is extinct, and it's like, no, it's really not.
Of course not. Basically, the plague decimated Europe. 80% of the population died during plagues.
And then they got cats.
And
They did more than get cats. But.
well, the problem was they got rid of the cats that ate the rats that were infested with the fleas. And so people then got infected because the cats were destroyed because of the scare of witches. They were familiars of witches. So they killed all the cats, and then the plague came back and got them. And, that happened fairly often. So who survived? Most of us that survived have some form of resistance to plague. So there was a little selection pressure there. Those that survived.
Yeah, I think we've been really lucky, and there's been all kinds of exposed people traveling all over the place. It just didn't happen to be sick.
Yeah.
But there's no way that stuff was contained.
No, none of it was. And really, that is part of public health. So if you haven't seen the movie Outbreak, if you get an opportunity, I wouldn't buy it. I wouldn't pay anything for it. If you got it at the library, check it out. Okay. And you might want to watch it because there is, setting aside, as I say, the Hollywood drama, the The science is real. And is it a disease that could occur and could happen as fast as it did? There are cases of Ebola where it happens that fast, and cholera. But we still have outbreaks of cholera. You know, after the earthquake in Haiti, what happened? We had a bunch of Nepalese soldiers come in who brought cholera with them because Haiti had been cleaned up. Cholera was basically non-existent on the island of Haiti. And so they brought cholera in, and we started having people dying of cholera. And cholera can kill in hours once it starts getting active. So we have that. That's one of the things. One of the real issues with cleaning up water supplies started actually with cholera in London in, I think, the 1840s. There was an outbreak that one doctor, I think his name was Snow, actually, traced to a single water tap in the city of London. Now, you know, London is the city of London surrounded by a bunch of boroughs, sort of like New York. Okay? But, and we think of the whole metropolitan area as London, but the city, London, is one specific area. There was a tap there that he could trace back the spread of the disease to people getting water, because at that time there was no indoor plumbing. You went and got your water out of the tap. Well, the tap was coming out of the River Thames. Yeah. Today you wouldn't even think, if you fell into the River Thames, the first thing you do is want to get vaccinated against everything on earth, right? But at that time they didn't know that, so they went. He traced it to this one tap, and of course we've heard this story before, but I'll repeat it. Try to tell a doctor something that wasn't taught to him in medical school. He was ridiculed, and finally shown to be correct. So they cleaned up.
Was he still alive when he was shown
Yeah,
correct?
he was.
Okay,
He was
well,
still
there you
alive
go.
when he was shown to be correct, but he was ridiculed heavily for this. This is not uncommon. But he traced it there, and we knew, you know, he traced it to that water. At that time, nobody really understood how it spread. They didn't realize it was a waterborne disease. And they didn't realize that it was transferred by the fecal-oral route. So they had the tap. The intake from the tap was downstream from sewage, where people dumped sewage. So that's what was going on. So one of the first major public works issues was to clean up water supplies. And that cut a huge amount of disease. Now we've improved our ability to clean, except that now we're having other issues with our water supplies. There's a city in England that a few years ago, there were measurable and actually there was enough cocaine in the water supply to make people high. Because the cocaine use was so high, people take cocaine, you just pee it out. So it'd go into the water supply. There was no cleanup. There was nothing that they knew how to clean things up. So the water supply was contaminated with coke. Yeah, kind of interesting. But these things, again, we look at this and we think we have a clean water supply, and yet we don't necessarily. It's something that requires constant vigilance and testing. That's public health. Okay? There are a movement in the, I think, 70s and 80s in public health circles was really a movement that reads a lot like the liberal playbook today. Higher minimum wage, union support for reducing the amount of hours that people had to work. The benefits were that people could have home life with their families, and the kids would be better protected and better cared for and less likely to get into trouble. All these things were considered kind of silly from a public health standpoint, except that if we're talking about the health of the public, anything that enhances that health theoretically falls under that definition. Okay? So there's a lot about public health that people don't think about. It happens in the background. You don't think that going down to the doctor with your kids when they're born and getting them vaccinated is part of public health, but it is. It was some of the original public health efforts. In the early 1950s, when the Salk polio vaccine came out, a major public health effort went into vaccinating virtually every child in the nation. And I was in the first cohort to get hit by that vaccine, which was kind of a traumatic experience for a first grader, lining up and having people drive a needle into your arm.
My grandma remembers them coming into the schools and lining them all
Yep,
up
that's
to
what they
get the
did.
vaccines.
Yep. You got to watch people get poked and stabbed, and this was before they had the air guns that are used for a lot of mass immunization things. They used when I was drafted, and we were drafting thousands a month. They had to use air guns to vaccinate us because they had so many of us. Nowadays, I think they use mostly just disposable needles.
I'd rather have a shot with a needle.
The military still uses the air guns.
Some, not all. You can't use it on some things.
Yeah, but my friend's brother, he bemoans the air guns. He says, "Give me a needle any day."
I never minded
And I
them.
was like,
I never minded them because I knew enough to stay very still when they put that thing on my arm. And if you didn't move, it was, just a pinprick.
I think this hurt more than a needle.
The first one didn't on either arm. The second one hurt like crazy. And the second one also, a high-pitched squeal in the ear on that side. That's what I remember about that thing. Crazy. For bone conduction, obviously. But still, I'm sitting there. I go back and I think about that. But yeah, the second one hurt a lot. Because they'd already sensitized the skin. But yeah, I just soon have a regular needle now. They're getting so much better. They can use smaller gauge needles, but even then, the plague shot had to be a deep IM, and that needle looked like it was about that long coming at you. Now, of course, it was about a 2-inch needle driving that sucker in. But nevertheless, so get started reading the textbook. If that thing ever stops, if you want to print some of the textbook out, go ahead.
I don't think that'll be any.
Could be there won't. So let's go to, I'm going to bring up, okay. All right. If we go to Course Home, and that's where I am now with this, there's several things. There is a note about live sessions. I prefer as many people as possible to attend class, live class. As I said, there are several people that are online students only, so they will attend by viewing this. The due dates are pretty much in there. Discussions I want to talk about, but the due dates for every other assignment usually are at the end of the week. It's Saturday night. I'll keep the assignment open for one more week so that if you don't get it in on time, you can get it to me. Then after that, I need to close it. If it's still open and you haven't turned something in by about mid the next week, I'll have to zero the grade and then I can change it when you turn it in. if you turn in something that you already have a 0 grade on, the best thing you can do is just send me an email and say, hey, I turned it in. Because sometimes it will let me know that you've done so, and sometimes it won't. Okay? So the daily checkpoints are there. You got 6 a week. You have to do 4 of them minimally. There's 2 more. They're extra credit. So, you know, I'm not going to tell you that it only takes a few minutes to do them. Some involve some reading and some thinking, but they're supposed to actually help you with your instructions. So, do them. We want you to be in the course at least 4 days a week. So that's why we want you to do at least 4 of the checkpoints. Do them all.
So week one, for instance, week 1 Sunday would be next Sunday, right?
Week 1,
For the daily
there is
checkpoints.
no Sunday. It goes Monday through Saturday.
This Sunday is
Just on the online courses.
Maybe in the online courses, but
Oh, this one does have Sunday.
um,
That's extra points, 5 extra.
Yeah, it's got week 1 Sunday.
This was pulled out of an online class. All right, I'll have to fix something.
or you can just leave
It's all right. I'll just leave it there. Pardon?
it. I said, or you can just leave it.
I'm going to leave that, but I need to fix something else to adjust points. That'll be transparent to you, so don't worry about it. So due dates for the discussions Wednesday night for your initial post. This week's discussion is about public health issues. I've made a fairly significant posting with a lot of information in
You're gonna
it.
have to dig through that. It's been printing all night. It won't even let mine print.
You're in the queue, Candy. You'll just have to be patient.
Well, it's been error printing, so I'm like,
Oh, well, then cancel that and try again later. I find that that's the only way it'll actually work. Take a look. I've given you several subjects. Better not be. Oh, it's probably unlocked at the end of this class. Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
All right.
It's locked.
All right. Let's bring it up. It's not locked in my stuff, so let's go back here. And here we go. It'll have instructions. Once you've read this the first time for the instructions, you guys will know the drill. You already know the drill. And then there is the actual discussion topic, which is at the bottom. And so in your textbook, Chapter 3 states public health is controversial because it challenges personal values and requires change or sacrifice. So I want you to select one public health issue from this list below. Okay. The list below is not an exclusive list. If you've got another one that you'd like to discuss, tell me, get my permission. But the issue is that I want you to look at what other people have chosen and choose something no one else is doing. There's only 6 of you in the class, and there's plenty of topics. So what I want you to do is look at the issue, find a couple of articles using the library facilities about that issue, and some of them are going to be much larger issues and have lots and lots of potential references. Most of them should actually have a fair bit, but pick one of these and talk about what are the public health issues, and how it, how it's going to challenge our personal values and what changes or sacrifices we may need to deal with it. Remember, this is a 300 level class, so there's going to be a lot of work. So I want you to do that. But I also say, just make sure you read my post down below it first. I'm not going to leave that up for you to read right now. It is lengthy, I will admit. I felt there was a lot of information I needed to convey in order to get this off the ground. Each week's discussion will not appear until after I have made the first posting. After that, it should be available. I made tonight's, or this week's, not available until after class tonight because I wanted to talk about it first.
So, will it let us read it, or do we have to post first? Because some classes are like that.
You can read what's been posted. And that's so that you will know what other people have posted about and can pick your own topic. Otherwise, you're going to be shooting in the dark. And I tried that once, or actually I just didn't set it up properly once. I didn't make an effort. And that discussion, I had a class of 8 people, and I think 4 people chose the same topic. That was not much information. So what I want you to do is pick a topic that is of interest to you. And if you want to claim it first, just do a quick post and say, I'm going to do maybe tobacco use. Okay. And then it's yours. Then you'll come back and edit that response and add to it. All right. But I find that works. So that's the discussion. There will be an assignment. There will be 2 assignments every week. One assignment will be to read the reading assignments and tell me what you learned that you didn't know. Now, there may be a lot of that, just one topic, one thing you didn't know out of each of the chapters. Short paper, APA, etc.
And just cite the book.
Just cite the book. Cite the book. And if you get interested in the topic and want to research it further, well, save that. You may find that that there will be issues. Take notes as you go along, especially topics that interest you, because I will tell you, your final is to discuss an issue. Okay? So you may want to start preparing. In fact, you can look at the requirements for the final right now. Okay? And we'll do that after we take our break, which is, we're supposed to take a 15-minute break. I think they're serving pizza out in the lobby. What in the world did you bring?
Shrimp fried rice.
Ah, that's not.
These are cheap and they actually taste really good, like surprisingly.
Well, cheap and good are good.
Now I don't know how healthy it is.
That's a different story.
But I mean, it can't be all that bad when it's got like a shorter.
Zoom the recording. So, first off, I gave you guys this stuff about the additional study times. This is something that is in place of the jam sessions. No one was coming to jams. So we're trying to give alternatives, additional study times for various things. Plus, there will be some skill building as well. I put an announcement in the announcements section of the shell that has an image, a JPEG of the skill building stuff that Chantel and the medical department are running. So refer to that. If you can make use of these services, please do so. We'd like to see more people in the school. So let's go back to looking at the shell. Each week there'll be a couple of assignments, as I said. One of them will be to do the readings and write a short document. Another will actually cover a topic. And this, let's just take a look at this week's, the week one. Oh, that's the one I just described. The assignment 2 in week 1 is actually looks at talking about the Union of Concerned Scientists. The Union of Concerned Scientists is a group of people who got together in the late 60s and finally formed their union to look at the implementation of essentially environmental science, but an implementation of science in general. So what you'll be doing here is going to their homepage, looking at the goals and mission of the organization, and then look at their news. They have a news thing, and they put out regular press releases and reports and all sorts of things. They even have a journal. They probably will ask you if you want to join. You don't need to do that. But what we want to do is look at their, what we call the restrictive or the expansive view of public health. Restrictive view and expansive view have to do with how broadly you think public health should be, how broad it should be, how widespread. And I'm going to pull up something later that I found, and we're actually going to discuss some of the topics on there and whether we think they are really a public health issue. Because calling something a public health issue seems to give it more believability, more importance. Okay, so we'll do that. But again, this is a paper, 1 to 2 pages long. Again, not very long, but submitted again by the end of the week. Okay, and you'll find assignments in each week. So the other thing you'll find each week is some form of assessment. This week it's a quiz. I can't tell you for sure that every week it will be indeed a quiz. As I said, your final is different. We'll go back, we'll go look at that so that you can be actually thinking about it during the mod. But the quiz will cover the chapters of the reading in your textbook. So that's one of the reasons that I want you to be reading those and really thinking about what it is you're learning. All right. So that's there. So let's go back to here.
Does it tell us how many questions?
Pardon?
there are?
There's about 10 questions in that one. So each of them is worth 5 points. Okay. So our final assessment is to write a 4 to 5 page paper on a topic. Although the 20th century witnessed great strides in the improvement of public health, the future of public health will continue to face new challenges. For this assignment, you're to examine the future of public health. So when you're reading your stuff, think about what's being said about future challenges. If you do a search for public health crisis, what you're going to see is a lot of political stuff about a crisis of leadership. That could affect the way public health works. just to let you know that there are lots of directions that can go. Examine the future of public health. What challenges will we face? What challenges have yet to be resolved? That is a growing list. Okay. All you have to do is look at the list from the week 1 discussion. None of those have been resolved. Okay. And what methods will be effective in dealing with public health issues? As a healthcare manager and administrator, what is your role in the future of public health? So I want you to be thinking about this as you're working your way through this class. Okay. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I do want to bring up something else. Let's see. Let's go down to, okay, what's this? There we go. All right. I want to bring this up. I had this thing up before. Here we go. So we're going to share this. Push that up there. All right. This comes from a website, EpiMonitor, which is, as they say, the voice of epidemiology, a voice of epidemiology. There are many voices in the field of epidemiology. But they periodically go through and survey the population about public health issues. You would think that they would be looking at infectious disease, among other things, and you'd think that the infectious disease would be a major part of this list. Well, let's see. But let's just take a look at some of these things in terms of public health issues. Gaming addiction. And here we're not talking about Blackhawk and Central City. We're talking about computer games and electronic games where you just see people constantly on them. I can't tell you how many times in the last few weeks we'd have to tell our daughter to put her phone down because she was playing some game on it, one of the Sims games or something. Can't remember what it was. But she'd be playing a game when we were trying to discuss important issues to do with the wedding. So there is, I think everybody knows young people who could spend 14 hours a day in front of a computer playing games. Is that a form of addiction? Well, my opinion, that is. Is it a public health issue? I don't know. I do know that the research now is that spending too much screen time is actually, we're actually seeing that it's damaging our eyesight. The research now is starting to really take what we've all suspected for years and is proving that it's true. So is that a public health issue? Yeah, we don't want a blind population. Is it a public health issue because we have a bunch of people that are so focused on something they have no social skills? Could be. So if you take an expansive view of public health, you might include that. Whereas if you took a restrictive view, you might say, no, that's a social issue. But social and public health are very much interconnected. Okay? Legalization of marijuana. Is that a public health issue?
I think in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't.
Is alcohol a public health issue? Well, why not marijuana? It impairs your judgment and your ability.
I don't think they don't know enough about it. Doesn't impair nearly as much as they think it does. Not like alcohol, but
Well, but just like alcohol, it depends on the person too.
I think that's
You know, because you've got my brother-in-law, teeny guy, but he could smoke a plant and he's fine.
or,
But then you've got my best friend that he smokes a single bowl and he's sitting there doing this.
yeah, it's just like alcohol
And
or
they smoke
anything
the
else.
same
There's some
thing.
people who shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different to everybody, but
But on the whole, yeah, it's a lot more. It's a lot more safe than alcohol.
That we know of so far.
that we know, yeah.
Yeah, and I
So-
don't think that'll change because it's been around for so we.
Although I feel like now we're making it more of a thing. You know, we've got a drunk driver that crashes and kills somebody, and he was under the influence of alcohol and marijuana, and suddenly nobody's caring about the fact that he was driving drunk. It's all about the fact of, well, how much marijuana did he smoke? What did he smoke? And it's like,
I think
why are we concerned about that part when it's like he was drunk?
I think they're scared and they're not going to be able to separate it now. I mean, they will. You know, before they used hemp as an excuse when they outlaw marijuana. Because like now too, they take over the paper industry. You know, they say they can only grow the trees so fast. Hemp, you can have 3 or 4, crops in a season.
Yeah.
And that's why they, because it was going to take over the paper industry way back when. And they made that illegal by making the smoked marijuana plant illegal. But, hemp, I guess you can't really, I mean, you could smoke it if you want to, but it won't do anything for you. So the stuff they make clothes and all that stuff with, doesn't really do anything. But that was the stuff they were afraid of.
Yeah. And in fact, there was a controversy in Arvada. Down at
Here.
First and Wilson, there's a big open field that's now going to be a hemp growing field. And the residents in the area, it's about a mile south of my house, the residents in that area were having a hissy about it. But it went through.
There's some place here too that they were just talking about.
Yeah. I
Or
remember.
they have signs up already that's saying that this is where this is going to be and you can't get high, so don't steal the plants.
That's exactly right.
Well,
You
and see,
can't-
that's the thing is a lot of people don't realize
Yeah, they
that
don't know.
there is a difference there. And I mean, I didn't know it until brother-in-law, obviously, was huge into the marijuana issue. But I didn't realize there were different plants. I didn't realize there were different parts of the plant used for different things. It's like, it's a plant that does the thing.
And that's
But now it's like there's,
part of the problem with the medical part, besides here in the States where they make it a level 1 schedule, so you can't do any kind of research. But these other countries, if you have to label everything that's on there, I don't even think they know exactly what's in there yet. There's so many of those cannabinoids, and like my son knows all about that stuff, this stuff and that stuff. And I mean, geez, it seems like there's millions of stuff in there that,
Sure.
they could never find it all, I don't think.
Yep. I can remember many years ago, I was visiting a friend in Gary, Indiana. And my friend, her father was Serbian and her mother was Italian. And her Italian grandmother lived with them. And her Italian grandmother had grown up, obviously, in Italy. And during World War II, she was making hemp ropes for Mussolini. And we're sitting there talking with her, and she starts going on, waxing poetically about smoking the hemp. And there's my friend Jeannie staring at her grandmother in utter horror. This is in about what? When was that? It would have been about 1972. So, a long time ago now. But I mean, Jeannie was just horrified at her grandmother talking about smoking dope. So it's been around a while. In fact, in the early part of the 20th century, smoking marijuana parties were as popular as cocktail parties with the moneyed set. And they all were smoking, you know. Remember there was a movie in the 30s, maybe 40s called Reefer Madness. And it was about smoking dope.
Well, that's a propaganda that for some reason still people believe today.
Yeah. So let's keep on going. The next item here is knife crime. Is that a public health issue?
Yeah, but it could be also part of the cure. You know, they said in Russia where they outlawed all the guns, now they have a lot of stabbings, but nobody's getting shot.
Yeah. Well, you know, if you're going to kill somebody with a knife, you got to get within reach.
Oh yeah,
And he might have a bigger knife.
Yeah.
Well, in Longmont, we had Silver Creek High School. We had a huge stabbing happen there because the kid got scissors into the classroom. It wasn't even a knife.
Yeah.
Because we were allowed to bring scissors. Meanwhile, like, I was sitting in a classroom with a bunch of guys that had pocket knives on them, and it's like, I'm good. But the one kid brought scissors, and then all of a sudden, none of us were allowed to bring scissors. But the boys could still have their pocket knives. It's like,
Yeah.
So I mean, to me, you know, some of these issues are really, you know, this is, if you look at it, it's a part of possibly way too many people. We're crowded. There's a classic experiment. Have you heard about the rats in a cage? Classic experiment. Put rats in a cage.
rats in a cage.
Yeah, rats are fairly social animals. They get along just fine. You can keep adding rats, and they get along fine. Finally, you add one rat, and they go berserk, and they try to kill each other spontaneously. So is violence? You know, okay, we've got knife crime. There's probably further on down here, there's something that's very political, which of course is gun violence. But it's part of the whole violence issue. Is violence in our society a public health issue? Yeah. It's a because public health also has a mental health component.
Yeah, and there's a lot of different kinds of violence.
Yeah. Deportations of children. Is that a public health issue?
Yeah, because public health is worldwide.
Well, yeah, but people would argue with you that that there aren't that many. I mean, public health should be something at risk for many, many, many people. Of course, if we've got millions of children being deported, that's many people. So these are issues that people have brought up. Bioterror.
And, well, you know, like the thing about the violence too, are those kids. I mean, they're going to grow up to be violent. You know, and one of them, I mean, like we're talking about violence here, and we don't really have that problem, but you have the instances where you have one violent act, you know, killing, 50 people or something.
Mm-hmm.
But there's always going to be small stuff, everywhere. I mean,
Yep.
But those kids will grow up and they will have problems that are going to affect society later, possibly.
Right. Right. Bioterror. Is that a public health issue?
Yeah.
Well, it certainly could be. The public health authorities got involved in the anthrax scare that occurred in 2001. Terrorism in general. There were public health issues with the 9/11 attacks. All the crap that went into the air when those buildings collapsed.
Yeah, those buildings are full of asbestos.
Yeah. And concrete particles and glass particles and
It got pulverized.
Yeah. Right. Residential fires. That was one that I looked at and said, okay, wait a minute. Is this, then someone dies every 153 minutes and someone is injured every 30 minutes in a residential fire. Does that make it a public health crisis?
I wouldn't say crisis. It's definitely an issue, but I wouldn't say necessarily a crisis. Maybe that's me talking from safe little Colorado, where our biggest forest fire was like a year ago. But like I can see it in California because they have all those.
But
big
a
fires.
forest fire is different from a residential fire.
Yeah, and this is, depends on
Right.
the reasons for it. If there was a bunch of electrical stuff that was bad one year and they maybe they have 30 or 40 house fires from it. But
Yeah.
if you got people that aren't turning off, their stoves and stuff like that, that's a public, or,
Right.
the education doesn't get to them that don't do that or something. I mean, that's a public thing.
Yeah, like I could see it like in the Firestone area where they had that house explode because of the gas line
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that makes sense. That raises the question, well, what other problems are there in this neighborhood? We need to survey the neighborhood.
Yeah, but
But I don't
it,
know that I would put it at a crisis.
well, okay, public health issue. And let's look at it at also when there's an issue and you've identified an issue. Oh, the printer stopped. You guys can print your book if you want now. But anyway, or Candy will be back here wanting to print. Anyway, but the issue is that means that you are, again, requires investigation. Who's going to investigate it? Mostly it's going to be local authorities, which are not public health people. We have very limited public health resources. And shouldn't you be looking at investing them in things that are much more important than a house blew up? Yes, some people got killed. Yes, that's terrible. Yes, for them. The rest of us, are we worried about our houses blowing up? Well, maybe if I lived next door, I would.
I was going to say, a lot of times we don't want to even think about it.
No, we don't.
Because, it might not be a public crisis, but I know some of these houses, the way they're getting built, if somebody was to have a problem and they open that house, it wouldn't really be a crisis then. But if they started opening up a bunch of houses where they're not even having problems, but then they'd open it and see the same problem, then that's a crisis.
Well, it's like my mother-in-law's neighborhood. Her neighbors had some weird electrical problem. Like they were flipping switches and the lights would turn on in random parts of the house. They went in and they looked at a bunch of the houses around them, and all of the houses had like screwed up electrical circuit boards where it's like all of these wires are connected right into each other and they're all just touching each other. So you could have it where you go to turn on the garbage disposal and instead the lights in the bathroom and the fan turn on. And it's like,
That's a building code violation.
I was going to say,
yeah, that's not public health.
and when you
but
think
it's
about
like-
it, though, that would almost be like a public health thing. You have layers of inspectors, and everybody missed it.
Yeah.
And all that
Because they
happens in
weren't
public health,
inspecting.
too. They don't. They're not looking at what they should be looking at, or they just assume it's okay.
Well, we've worked with this guy before. Why would he cause us problems now? Yeah,
Or he's my buddy.
there's that too.
A lot of things. But also it says a lot more about the supervision of the people that, an experienced electrician is not going to do that. Period. So they've got a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing. They've been said, okay, you twist wires together and do this and poke them in there and you're done. And that doesn't work.
And that is a crisis now, because I can't believe how short they are in skilled labor, but they'll only have like one licensed electrician with maybe 20 workers on a site. Then they're doing 10 or 12 houses. And
You can't supervise
just
that
one
many.
guy's licensed, yeah.
You cannot supervise that many.
Well, it's kind of like the pharmacy thing.
Mhm.
My pharmacist constantly will do something and she'll be like, okay, that's on my license.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's always her, any little mistake we make
It is.
is it's on my license. And I'm sitting there and it's like, if our certifications meant more, it would be on my certification. But it's not on my certification. To some extent it is.
That's
but
the
it's
pharmacy board's issue.
Yeah.
And again, does that make it a public health issue? We do have, as I said, there's expansive definition and there's a restrictive definition. And I'm not trying to define any of these as public health or not, but there are things to say about them that tell us whether we have that expansive definition or that restrictive definition. I want you to think about that when you're working on the assignment for this week with the Union of Concerned Scientists, okay? Because we do have that. Some of these things could very well be considered public health. I'll skip over chemsex because I'm not sure what the heck that is.
I tried reading it and I couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, I have no idea what it is.
And increasingly prevalent presenting problem in sexual health clinics.
Yeah, I have no idea what that means. And I'm not sure I'm going to spend any time looking it up either. But let's go to elder abuse, okay? Elder abuse is something that is a major issue in this society. And I can understand how it can occur. I'll be honest. You know, we live with, we moved my mother-in-law in with us. She's now 98 years old. She's getting increasingly difficult to handle. And it's not that she's not crazy. She's not violent. She's not a lot of things. She just requires constant supervision. And I can understand how someone who was having issues with self-control and anger could want to go sometimes. Because when I feel that way, I get up and go wash the dishes or mow the lawn or, you know, do something to distract myself. And I don't feel that way very often. And it usually has to do with trying to get information out of her. She is a person who will not answer a question or does one of the things that I despise the most, which is you ask her a question and she asks you a question in return. You know, I just want to grab somebody who does that and shake them. That's not an answer.
What would you like for dinner? I don't know. What do you want to drink with dinner?
What am I offered?
Oh, God.
Nothing.
Because of that, you get nothing.
You know,
Have a good night.
and that's elder abuse. Not feeding her would be abuse.
Well,
And,
like,
you know, so the issue is how prevalent is that as a problem? From my observation, my wife and I thank God that we did this, but my wife and I took a course in elder care, in, you know, caring for elderly and ill people. And, you know, we felt lucky. I mean, there are people there whose spouses were Looney Tunes and impossible to deal with and incontinent and all sorts of things. Thank God we don't deal with that at all. They've got Wi-Fi all over the building they've added in the last couple of weeks. I just noticed that one in here. I knew it was here. Bill Colby told me it was here this morning. So that's one thing. Poverty. Now, poverty is actually on the list of the people that are the pillars of structuring public health as a public health issue, because we know that people in poverty are less healthy. They consume more expensive resources for health care. They're not going to visit the doctor regularly, so they're not going to go until they're very ill, at which point they're very hard to deal with. So this is actually, again, if you talk to a politician, they're liable to say, no, it's not public health. We're not going to fund poverty studies in public health. But the data are very clear.
have them sit in a pharmacy for a week. Because I have people who come in and even with Medicaid and Medicare, they're like, I can't afford that. I can't afford that price. And it's devastating because it's like, these are medications you need. Like, these are maintenance medications.
Yeah.
And they can't afford them.
I was in a pharmacy picking up a medication for my mother-in-law. And I was standing there, and probably what happened next was a real HIPAA violation. But I'm standing at one register waiting for the prescription to be delivered. And the tech is at a register about 8 feet away, talking to this couple. And she says, well, this, and she named a drug, is going to cost you $850. And they just stared, and I could see the woman just almost go into tears. I can't afford that. I can't afford that. And she was, well, I'm sorry, your insurance isn't authorizing payment, and I can't give you a break. I can't do anything except this is what the cost is. And I finally said, I can't stand this. And I spoke up and I said, I know that drug. I don't take that drug because I don't take any. But I know that drug, and I know that the company that makes it has a patient assistance plan. Call them. They will give you, they will probably provide you with a voucher that will cut the majority of that cost out. And then the funniest thing happened. About 6 feet behind me, a woman spoke up and said, yeah, my daughter's taking that drug, and that's what we had to do. The pharmacy tech didn't know it. You know,
with a lot of our medication.
well, almost every drug company for expensive drugs has a patient assistance program. So, you know, that's right. I mean, you know, that to me is a public health issue when people cannot afford drugs. But that's my bias.
Or them not knowing, but then you don't have to have a certification to work in the pharmacy.
No, you don't.
No,
No.
but that's a Colorado statute.
Yeah.
Most
Colorado
other
doesn't. Most other states require it.
You have to have a certification. If I were to go to California right now, they'd look at me and laugh. They'd be like, yeah, come back when you have your cert.
But
Even the
don't you have
Walgreens.
to get it like in every state. You have to get it or is it?
Mm-mm.
If you get the pharmacy technician certification board or the EXCPT certification, they're national. Many pharmacies prefer the PTCB, the Pharmacy Technician Certification Board test. My experience looking at those tests is that they're different tests, but you can't say that one is easier than the other. They're just different. They're tough tests.
First one is difficult.
And the thing is that you're not required. I could work at Walgreens for the next 30 years and never get my cert.
Yeah.
But I'd never get a raise.
Yeah.
And that's
And
what
a lot of the
pharmacies
pharmacies
do
are
that.
now hiring with a proviso that you go ahead and get your certification too. They're realizing, because some of them have gotten into trouble because they were using uncertified, and I blame the pharmacists here, not properly trained or supervised technicians. It's caused many problems. Let's just keep going down the list. I love the fact that somebody put media down here because of the influence on children. That one is, to me, I can see where you'd say that potentially it's a public health issue or a public issue, but I'm not sure. Bed bugs.
I've never ever had an experience with bed bugs.
You're lucky. I mean, I haven't either, and I'm lucky. But I've had people go to high-end hotels. I mean, we're talking 5-star hotels, and get bed bugs because a guest came in with bed bugs.
Yeah.
And
we got lucky. Our apartments, there was like 4 or 5 in the apartment complex, and ours was the only one that didn't get bed bugs. So then again, like the rest of them were all from like Mexico, so they don't really eat very well.
No, they don't, unfortunately. Let's take a look at on down. There was child mental health. I think that, you know, mental health issues are critical, and with children, they're even more so these days. Violence against women. And we know that goes on. It's one of the lesser reported crimes because many women do not report the violence. Football. Is that a public health? I mean, there's how many football teams and how many members of each team? That's not the public, right?
Honestly, I would put it at sports. high contact sports, just because of what they say here, because of the numbers of people who have long-term impairments due to playing. I would put it at high contact sports.
And I think that's something too that they're just going to have to say.
Yeah, it's
That's
one
the
that
way it's
you're-
going to be. If you participate in this sport, this is a possibility.
And they might start doing that.
Because there's
Well,
some
a
things
lot
that
of
those
the-
guys can do, but now some of the things they're asking them to do, I don't really think that's realistic.
Well, and a lot of
That stuff's happening so fast.
the football players will sit there and go, "It was worth it."
Oh, for
You know,
them,
my
yeah.
my dad played college in football, and he got a huge chunk of his arm ripped out, and he's got no feeling in that arm now. But he'll sit there and he'll be like, "No, it was worth playing the game."
Yeah, for sure.
But it was
And
less,
it's like-
when your dad was playing in college, it was a less violent game.
That's very true.
Definitely.
Like, the only reason he got that chunk ripped out was because he had fallen, and the guy that was running over him, his
Stomped on it.
cleats ended up
Yeah.
getting him.
Yeah.
Not an on purpose
Yeah.
thing or.
So the issue is not so much football, but with and you pointed out, violence in sports.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, if they start looking, we're going to find it with soccer players, definitely rugby players,
Hockey.
hockey.
those
Good
guys.
God, I
And
can't
now
believe they
there's
haven't
maybe
already
football
seen it.
players too on ice.
Yeah.
Well, but hockey players have never been small. Like football players, you would get some guys that were kind of smaller, and you get some
No,
that
all
were
the
kind of
hockey
bigger.
players.
But
are
all the
small
hockey players are these big old.
now.
I
but
mean, they look
before
like they're
when it
on
was Wayne
steroids.
Gretzky,
Yeah, he
Wayne
was a
Gretzky was
he was
like
a
an ordinary
shrimp.
guy. Yeah, he was like an ordinary hockey guy.
Yeah.
They weren't very big. Now they're
Yeah.
just like football players, 6'5", 240, 280 on skates. Shit, that's a lot of momentum.
A lot of
I don't see how they can play 80 games a season.
Well,
So we'll find
Or
that
some,
there's
you know,
problems
lot.
there.
And
Let's just keep on
I don't understand
taking a
the-
look. I'd like to pick a few others here that have multiple issues associated with them. Some of them are related to things like, the famous war on drugs, which has always been considered a failure. Hate crimes. Again, those as we understand hate crimes, maybe police violence, and it depends on where you are and who you are and what your ethnicity is. If police violence is an issue to you,
Yeah,
I
and,
guarantee you, the black community has a different view than
Oh yeah,
others.
it depends on the police agency too. But
Yeah.
they need to come up with a a standard, like a federal standard or something.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's governed by state law.
The way I was trained, though, every single one of those, they should have been, they should have been charged with murder. And some of them premeditated. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just the way I was trained.
well, and now people are saying, "Oh, let's just give them tasers."
Oh
Right.
yeah, I
Yeah,
don't-
that's a great
Yeah,
idea.
right,
They
which
can
kill
do just
people.
yeah, it's like
Yeah,
you
I don't
can
think they
do
should
just
even-
as much, if not more.
they shouldn't be able to carry a gun until they're 40.
I mean, it's
Okay.
you've got places that
Yeah.
they do it differently, but it doesn't.
Suicide. We're hearing more and more about suicides. It's especially bad in certain populations. But is it a public health issue? I don't
They
know.
don't take
The
anybody
mental-
else with them.
The mental aspect of it is.
And that goes back to mental health,
Yeah.
which is, of course, definitely an important issue for public health.
I've
Racism.
Like I've noticed a lot of these have mental health components.
They do.
But it's like now we're just trying to section them out, and it's like, but if we section out all the different aspects of mental health, are we really helping mental health, or
No.
are we just treating that?
No, we're doing what we've done with virtually everything else. We're trying to make it little parcels that do a little bit of fix, but don't actually solve the problem. Racism is another issue. It's a hard one. I'm part of a group studying racism and social justice in general. And it's a pretty horrifying topic. The more I read about it, the more I realize we We recently went to see the movie Black Klansman. Ever heard of it?
Mm-hmm.
It's a movie set in 1972-73 in Colorado Springs. The very first Colorado Springs black cop infiltrated the KKK. This is a true story. Infiltrated the KKK with the assistance of a white cop that worked with him, who actually, the black cop would do all the phone calls and the white cop would go to the meetings. And they pretended that he was, that they were the guy. And it's a movie with a message, but it really is a movie that shows you that things haven't changed in 50 years at all. And it's kind of interesting. I was really, it was done up as a Hollywood flick, so it didn't adhere. It was based on a book written by the black cop that he got his KKK membership card. Honest to God. And he is credited with stopping a number of violent acts. And the Klan is no longer the same force in that part of Colorado as it was. At the same time, the Klan was a big force right up here. So.
Oh yeah, the day that my high school history class learned that Longmont had been an epicenter for the KKK.
Oh yeah.
All of them went pale, except for like the 3 or 4 of us whose great grandparents or whatever had been part of it, and we're all sitting there going, Yep. And one of the girls, our teacher pulled up a photo and she went, that one right there in the middle, up in the 3rd row, that's my granddad. And everybody turned and looked at her. And, I give it to her. Like, people tried to sit there and torment her about it. And she's like, oh, no, I'm well aware that what he did was horrible.
Mayor Stapleton in Denver was a Klansman. Long history.
Yeah.
Anyway, is racism a public health issue? It's a societal issue of very great complexity, to the extent that it means that Black Americans don't get as good a health care as white Americans or other people that that can get health care. Yeah, that's an issue. But is it an issue for the public health system? That's a question. I don't know.
I think it kind of is. My ex-husband and his friend, same age, same health, whole 9 yards. His friend is Black, and he pays an extra $30 for his insurance. They have the same insurance plan. They work together. He pays an extra $30.
Because he's considered higher risk.
Because he's Black. Yeah. And it's like, really? My husband drives a motorcycle, but you're not charging him an extra $30.
Does your husband drive a motorcycle wearing a helmet?
Yes and no. Now, of course, he told the insurance company, yes, I did. Yes, I do. But it's like, he drives a very dangerous vehicle, and this is a Black guy in Longmont, Colorado.
Yeah.
I'm not saying racism doesn't exist in Longmont, but
it does. It exists everywhere.
Right.
Okay, let's keep on going and look at a few other things. Bullying. What are this? And again, this causes psychological issues. Okay, what are you looking at?
The health issue, the mental health issues.
Yeah. Mental health issues are a part of it. And it's widespread. And it seems to be getting worse. Alcohol use. I don't think anyone would argue with alcohol as an issue for health in general. But is it a public health issue? We tried banning it once. It didn't work.
No, we got speakeasies out of that.
Yeah. And a very rich Joe Kennedy. So, yeah.
I think it is and it isn't. I think it's one of those ones that we kind of have to bite the bullet and just deal with it as it is and just try to educate as much as we can.
Well-
because I still remember my health class
Hmm.
where don't drink alcohol, you'll die. Good talk.
Yeah.
Like it
Well-
doesn't,
Here again,
you know.
I don't drink alcohol. I don't use drugs of any sort. And I know I have cheaper medical insurance because of that. I don't smoke. I know that I have cheaper medical insurance because I don't engage in risk activities.
Right.
It doesn't mean that I'm not at risk. I can still get broadsided and killed by a drunk driver running a red light.
Yeah.
Or even a not drunk driver running a red light. But I can still get broadsided and injured or killed that way. But it's less likely because I'm more likely to be paying attention to my surroundings. So, and not smoking, we all know smoking is a public health issue. Not smoking helps. This is one that I found interesting. Adolescence as a public health issue.
Yeah.
I think there are very well recognized physiological and psychological changes going on in people from the time they're about 10 to about 20-ish. There are other ways of dealing with it that the society should take on. In fact, we're involved in one of those programs ourselves. And it really is a program to channel their energies in better places. And remarkable results. Parents tell us that the kids we've worked with are so much better. And it hasn't cost them a dime because we all do it for free. So there's lots of ways to deal with that. I'm not so sure. And adolescence is an undefinable term. If you think about, remember the tailhook incident? Navy fighter pilots. They refer to themselves as the Tailhook Society because, of course, when they land on an aircraft carrier, there's a hook that catches a cable that stops them from just going right off the end of the carrier and into the drink. Okay? So the Tailhook Society. All of these guys are mid-30s, 30 to 40 years old, and they're having a convention, lots of alcohol. And they forced the women pilots to run the gauntlet as the men groped them. These are adolescents. They just happen to be 35 years old. So define adolescence. It's a behavioral thing as well. So, so I have an issue with that personally. However, I will not argue that we could have a lot better society if someone actually had a real good program to deal with teenagers and channel all of that energy and all of those changes and the emotional issues that they're going through into a positive direction.
My mom and I were actually discussing this because my daughter recently started daycare and we've noticed how much better she's gotten behaviorally because they keep her busy, they keep her doing things. And, we had my nieces and nephew, and oh God, they were awful. But during the school year, they're the easiest kids in the world for me to take care of and watch because they've run all their energy out and they're busy like, oh, well, I'm doing this at school and this is what we're practicing for. But when they have their summer vacations, it's suddenly all of that's gone.
Yeah.
And my mom and I were talking about how like Japan, they have summer vacation, but instead it's half days. And it was like, if we could keep that kind of flow for kids year round, maybe we wouldn't have these terrors that are summer vacationers.
Could be. Again, give them something to do. Positive. That's really one of the keys. Okay. Injury. Is that a public health issue? I mean, we can't make everything a public health issue. Injuries, it says here they're preventable. Well, maybe. Sometimes not.
I mean, if you want to try and monitor my 2-year-old from scraping her knee on the sidewalk when she goes to the park, by all means, find a way to try to do it.
well, yeah, the issue is that with, again, saying they are preventable. Yeah, they're preventable. I mean, automobile injuries. I mean, I read a statistic one time that a cop actually made a presentation, I think, and that's how we heard the statistic. He said 35% of accidents, there is absolutely no sign that either party involved took the first or any defensive action. You know, nothing. They didn't brake. They didn't swerve.
They just froze.
They just ran into each other, or one of them ran into the other. But, you know, when we were, a couple of weeks ago, we were in Santa Fe. And we were heading off to go to the Spanish Market. We were there for Spanish Market weekend. And we were staying down in the southern part of the city near I-25. And pulling out of the hotel parking lot, there was a traffic light. Traffic light had a double left turn to get over to the main road. So I pull up in the inside, or would have been the outside of the double left. There's a guy in a truck pulling a trailer in the other lane next to me. The light turns green. I pull out, he pulls out, and he does this. He comes right at me. He was going to turn into my lane. I was in the right, and I literally almost had to climb a curb. I leaned on the horn and got out of his way. He never even noticed. So, yeah, that was a preventable accident because I did prevent it. But, you know, it's just that silly stupidity. So again, better training. Is it a public health issue? I don't know.
You can't fix stupid.
Yeah, that's a public health issue, isn't it? Size of soda servings. Well, we've had that debate many, many times, especially, you know, the biggie size everything else and get a Diet Coke. Infertility, is that a public health issue? I have to say, unless you can show me that it's becoming widespread, it can't be a public health issue. It's an individual issue. And unless you can show me that there is a cause in the environment, such as the large extreme levels of like hormone-like molecules that are changing the fertility of men and women, then is it a public health issue? I don't know. Again, I'm not trying to put anything on here. There's 2 entries on gun violence. We won't go into that. That's a political issue. Is it a problem? Every day you hear about shootings.
Well,
What was it? 60 people in Chicago got shot last weekend?
Was it Chicago?
Yeah. Yeah. We won't talk about marijuana again. Trauma.
I'm sorry. Trauma lost its meaning after 3 colleges closed their campuses because Trump became president. Because their students just couldn't deal with it.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing, is that a lot of these.
Well, I want to know what trauma means in this context. And the reason I want to know what trauma means in this context is that when I was growing up, trauma was an injury, a physical injury.
Yeah.
And you can have traumatic events in your life that will cause you mental anguish for a while.
Yeah.
But I think I'm just not sure that this particular one is. Someone said it's the #1 public health issue of our time. I don't know. Okay.
Unregulated stress is linked to obesity, diabetes, depression,
Yep.
suicide.
Lots of different things. Hoarding. This sounds like somebody has a problem with people doing that. I mean, what's hoarding? Is it the Mormons having 6 months worth of food in their house at all times? That isn't hoarding. Not in my book.
Well, and
Is it, having so much crap in your house that you can't walk? Well, maybe.
Well, and like I have a problem with it because if you look at like my uncle's backyard, he'd look like a hoarder because he's got car parts everywhere, but he's also a mechanic.
Yeah.
That's what he does. So
Let's keep going.
What about HIV and AIDS in fishing communities?
Yeah, I know. I was looking at that one. Thank you, Richard. I was looking at that one and thinking to myself, devastatingly high in some fishing communities. What does that say about those communities?
Yeah.
And I don't know. HIV is clearly a public health issue. Or it was for a while, and I'm not sure it still is. It's now medically manageable. And when we found out that it was very hard to contract the disease, that sort of reduced its level to me. All season tires. This one cracked me up.
Cold weather and all season tires, they are unsafe in cold weather and dangerous in snow.
People are
dying because of these tires. Manufacturers are allowed to market tires as all season, knowing they are unsuitable in cold weather.
That just sounds like a compositional issue to me.
that sounds like somebody who went to a shady person to get their tires changed.
Could be.
Because all of the all-season tires I've seen have tread like that deep.
Yeah.
in there.
Okay, let's keep on going. Let's skip a few things here. I mean, we already know about obesity in children, adults, childhood labor. I don't know about active transportation. I think I see the issue here is really a public transportation issue. And again, that is a different issue in so many ways because there are public health issues with having 97 bazillion automobiles and trucks on the road. Yes, that could be ameliorated by an efficient public transportation system, but no one is going to invest the trillions of dollars that it would take to actually make something like that would work. We already know what happened down in Denver when Bill Ritter basically gave up his governorship to get light rail. It cost him that, and he knew it was going to do it. Online pornography. Again, it depends on what you think it does to people. Personally, I can't imagine why anybody'd be interested in it, but that's a different story.
Preventing healthy sexuality, disempowering women, leading to sexual violence and non-consensual sex.
And I'd like to see the studies that prove that. I mean,
everybody
everybody says that like it's the truth. I haven't seen those studies.
Yeah, I thought that was supposed to keep them from
I'm sorry, has anybody ever looked at
from
a female
from
porn
attacking
star's
women for
paycheck?
non-consensual sex. I'm sorry.
Has anybody ever looked at a female porn star's paycheck? Because like the whole disempowering women thing, it's like the females make way more than the men do. Maybe they're talking, I don't know. But
Yeah, anyway.
Still, it's like, all right.
Climate change.
That's a hard one.
Well,
Like, I could see how it
here's
it could be.
yeah. Here, look at it. If the climate changes so that we can't grow food, we're going to starve.
Right.
That's a public health issue. If it gets so hot, one of the things that really kind of shocked me was reading an analysis that was talking about trends in weather, and that by 2050, the climate in Denver was going to be like that of current day Las Cruces, New Mexico. No snow in the mountains. In other words, Colorado will dry up and blow away on the wind.
So move north.
Yeah, everybody's moving up to Montana.
Oh. I want to live in a desert.
Well, think about it.
Middle of the ocean should be good.
On a floating platform so that when the ocean rises, you go with it.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Okay, and
then
the last
eventually
thing on
getting
here
by
is
shark
well,
attacks.
I mean, literally, we can see how climate change can impact health. As the temperatures rise, we're already seeing people. Look at what's happened in France this year. You may or may not have been reading some of this, but they've had hundreds of people die from heat in France this year.
Because they're not used to it.
They're not used to it. The heat, the temperature is rising. Australia is literally burning. We think we have fires here. When they start in Australia, they are horrific.
Well, they still have that one that they haven't gotten under control from early January.
That's right.
And it's like, what is there left to burn at this point? Like, that's what it's really coming down to, is how it's still going.
Yeah, well, part of it is how do you get to it and stop it?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of open space out there and not all that many roads. I lived there for a while.
Yeah.
So gang violence, and we're going to quit in a second here. Is that a public health issue?
I think it's a community health
That
issue.
it is a community mental health issue. It is also, why do we have gangs? What's missing? What could be provided to eliminate the need for gangs?
Better paying jobs, better
Yeah, lots of
houses,
different things.
better health.
Okay, so we're gonna cut this off. For those of you who are going to watch this, and I hope you do, send me an email, and in that email, I want you to send me the word PERTH, P-E-R-T-H. Okay, and that's the end of class. See you all on Wednesday. Get to work on your discussions and your assignments. Start reading your book. So, and as we're going through this class, I want you to think about how we can improve it. Okay? All right, thanks a lot. And I'm going to stop the recording.